Good day! Today, it's another topic that I present. It's all about presentation of primitive communism and egalitarian society. So, here's the outline of today's webinar. Introduction, definition of primitive communism, characteristics of primitive communism, Marxist theory of primitive communism, definition of egalitarian society, origin of egalitarian society, economic feature in egalitarian society, modern egalitarianism theory. So, let's get started. Definition of primitive communism. Primitive communism refers to the collective right to basic resources, the absence of hereditary status or authoritarian rule, and the egalitarian relationships have preceded exploitation and economic stratification in human history. Primitive communism is a way of describing the gig economies of hunter-gatherers throughout history, where resources and property hunted and gathered are shared with all members of a group in accordance with individual needs. Primitive communism is the earliest mode of production in Marxist thought. Karl Marx proposed that ancient feudal and bourgeois modes of production are epochs that mark the transition of societies. Also, the changes in the mode of production from primitive communisms through slavery, feudalism, capitalism, and socialism to communism are due to the method of dialectic and the theory of materialism. The dialectic method involves the meeting of extreme forces that merge into synthesis. At the early stage of primitive communism, primitive forms of hunting gave way to primitive forms of agriculture and cattle rearing. Also, dialectic changes of the matriarchate to the patriarchate types were recognized. Origin of social communism. In political and social sciences, communism, from Latin communist, common universal, is a philosophical, social, political, and economic ideology and movement whose ultimate goal is the establishment of the communist society, which is a social economic order structured upon the common ownership of the means of production and the absence of social classes, money, and the state. Communism is a political system that comes from the Latin meaning common. Based on a collective ownership of the production of goods, communism rejects individual ownership of industry and promotes the manufacture of goods in order to satisfy the basic needs of the economy and the people. Communism includes a variety of schools of thought which broadly include Marxism and anarcho-communism, as well as the political ideologies grouped around both, all of which share the analysis that the current order of society stems from capitalism, its economic system or mode of production, namely that in this system there are two major social classes. The relationship between these two classes is exploitative, and that this situation can only ultimately be resolved through a social revolution. History of primitive communism. Karl Marx and Engels were inspired by Louis Henry Morgan's description of communism in living that characterized the Iroquois nation of North America. The speculative evolutionary history by Lewis highlighted the liberty and equality among the Asian people that was evident in the family setting of the Iroquois nation. Engels transformed this idea into an evolutionary theory with a publication, The Origin of the Family, in 1884. He argued that transition from traditional modes of production to subsequent production involved a change of production for domestic or family use to production for sale or exchange, and a transformation from communal family relations to an individual family as the main economic unit. Marx and Engels expanded the use of communism to include not only hunters and gatherers but also subsistence agricultural communities. Characteristic of primitive communism: full democracy. This is because about all members of the society had to make decisions to arrive at a solution regardless of their sexes. In Marxist theory, a new democratic society will arise through the organized actions of the international working class, enfranchising the entire population and freeing up humans to act without being bound with the labor market. There would be little, if any, need for a state, the goal of which was to enforce the alienation. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels stated in the Communist Manifesto and later works that the first step in the revolution by the working class is to raise the proletariat to the position of ruling class, to win the battle for democracy and universal suffrage, being one of the first and most important tests of the militant proletariat. Of specialization. This is because all people in a society are supposed to do all jobs together. Jobs include tool making, gathering fruits, preparing shelter, and hunting. In a long-term perspective, three observations become self-evident. The first is that any apparent beneficiary of capitalist industrialization has its prosperous days counted before turning to one of capitalism victims. Sometimes these victims because they are victims. High unemployment, therefore oversupply of labor, therefore cheaper labor, might attract new rounds of capitalist investment. Second, from a spatial perspective, industrialization and deindustrialization are processes that together express the historical geography of capitalism. Its highly dynamic and uneven nature that so much impressed Marx and his followers. Third, from a political perspective, it becomes clear that the state has a crucial regulatory role to play in deciding the fate of industrialization. Absence of exploitation. The communal societies has neither exploiters or exploited. During primitive communism, property belonged to the community and labor owned all the product of its labor in the absence of capital and land-owning classes. If one tribe was conquered by another, the conquered tribe became propertyless, as was the case with slavery and serfdom. Shifting cultivation. Primitive economic organizations were of the subsistence type. That is equal to the broad theory of production consumptions economics. One important reason for this is the absence of technological means to exploit nature. As is illustrated by shifting cultivation. Shifting cultivation means that the same plots of land are cultivated from long, and that cultivators went from one class to another. The reasons for doing so are understandable. The decreasing amount of land as a result of continuous cultivation only counteracted proper nature. If nature worsens a rather advanced state primitive subsistence agriculture is characterized by long winters, science relating usually accepted characterized by the experience of others. Shifting cultivation was also called slash and burn agriculture. Hunting and gathering. Hunting and gathering societies hunt animals and gather plants as their means of survival. Hunter-gatherers move about a great deal in search of food, but they cover only a small area because their food sources are so limited. Usually men were hunting and women were gathering. Primitive communism is a way of describing the gift of economies of hunters-gatherers throughout history, where resources and property hunted and gathered are shared with all members of group in accordance with individual needs. No economic surplus. production was for keeping members of the societies alive on a daily basis. There would be no private property, which is distinguished from personal property such as articles of clothing and simple personal items, because primitive society produced no surplus. What was produced was quickly consumed, and this was because there existed no division of labor. Hence, people were forced to work. Low level of development. Low level of development is because there was no surplus. Economic development was pictured as a process whereby these and low population densities and argued that a considerable amount of both surplus. There surplus labor as the chief means of promoting economic development. The mere existence of disguised unemployment does not in any way ease this problem. No private ownership. No private ownership of means of production. These means that the means of production, such as land, tools, and weapons, belong to the community. There would be no private property, which is distinguished from a personal property, such as articles of clothing and simple personal items, because primitive society produced no surplus. What was produced was quickly consumed, and this was because there existed no division of labor. Hence, people were forced to work. Shared property. There is no concept of ownership beyond individual possessions. The tribe shares everything in order to ensure its survival. Primitive communism is a way of describing the gift economies of hunting-gatherers throughout history, where resources and property hunted and gathered are shared with all members of group in accordance with individual needs. Marx's theory of primitive communism. Marx initially tried to create the basic tenets of communism began in the middle of the 19th century, as he observed the existing capitalist system being used as a tool by the bourgeoisie to enslave the working class or proletariat. He believed that capitalism was an antiquated system that fed on the working class and increased the gap between rich and poor. Capitalism, in Marx's eyes, contributed to the degradation of society and needed to be replaced. The primitive communism stage mostly like being soon after the dawn of humanity itself. At the stage where far is developed, and communal living therefore becomes more convenient. Primitive communist societies tend to be very small, consisting of the maximum of a few hundred members, with the size being dependent upon the environment. In this stage, humanity does not differ from any other animal group, in that it has not yet found ways to bend nature to its will. The Asian communal and state ownership which proceeds especially from the union of the several tribes in a city by agreement or by conquest. During this stage, the concept of private property begins to develop. With the development of private property, we find here for the first time the same conditions which we shall find again, only on a more extensive scale, with modern private property. On the one hand, the concentration of private property, on the other hand, coupled with this, the transformation of the plebeian and small peasantry in the proletariat. His well-known tome, the Communist Manifesto, published in 1848, and written with Friedrich Engels sought to outline the basic faults of capitalism and educate readers on the principle of communism. Marx's solution to the perceived problem of a free market society. The manifesto contained 10 steps, known as the 10 planks, were intended as a test to determine if a society had successfully become a communist state. The manuscript led to the banishment of Marx, his wife, and children from both Germany and France. He lived the remainder of his years in London, beginning in 1849. This stage ends with the development of private property, especially with the development of large-scale agriculture. This in turn produces productive property, such as cattle and slaves. The two classes are the proletariat, the working class, who make up the majority of the population within society and must work to survive, and the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class, a small minority who derives profit from employing the working class through private ownership of the means of the production. The members of the Communist Party are supposed to make the working class realize that capitalists exploit them and get them to revolt. Members of the Communist Party have to convince the people to form the ideal communist state and have to fight against the capitalists with all possible means. Marx and Lenin knew that the ideal state couldn't be created in one day. For some time, the Communist Party would have to rule the state to subdue the last capitalist resistance, to re-educate the people, and to convince them to become useful members of society. This gave the Communist Party absolute power in the communist countries. And like Acton said, power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. According to communist theory, there are two main social classes. First, there is the working class, consisting of the workmen and laborers who are exploited by their capitalist bosses. Then there is the bourgeoisie, the capitalists. They just profit from the work of their employees and are seen as the enemies of the working class. They should be extinguished or educated. In the ideal of communist society, there are no classes anymore. Everybody works, not for the money, but to be a useful member of society. The two classes are the proletariat, the working class, who make up the majority of the population within society and must work to survive, and the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class, a small minority who derives profit from employing the working class through private ownership of the means of production. Perceived benefits of communism. Theoretically, a communist society promotes the equality of all people. Classes do not exist in a communist system, and therefore all citizens are equal. This eliminates the class struggle that Marx believed caused numerous conflicts including shortages and war. Communist ideology seeks to eliminate child labor and encourage education for everyone. Each child is entitled to an education under communist principles. Communism supports a lack of competition, which originates within its beliefs equality for everyone. While communism does not support private industry, it does support the rule of the worker. Under the communist system, every member of society is given a job. The government owns all production and can therefore employ each member of society. In a capitalist economy, employment ebbs and flows. Lack of employment can lead to poverty, lowered self-esteem, and substance abuse. In a communist system, all citizens are provided work. Theoretically, there are many benefits that can be achieved through a communist society. Communist ideology supports widespread universal social welfare, improvements in public health and education, provision of child care, provision of state-directed social services, and provision of social benefits will theoretically help to raise labor productivity and advance society in its development. Communist ideology advocates universal education with a focus on development. The proletariat would acknowledge a class consciousness and historical understanding. Communism supports the emancipation of women, and the ending of their exploitation. Definition of egalitarian society. An egalitarian society is one in which there are as many positions of prestige in any given age, sex, and grade there are persons capable of filling them. These societies comprise of groups of people who agree to live together in these societies, as egalitarianism as one of their core values. Two things can be considered important if they have common relevant qualities. Based on this, it cannot be denied that all men are equal. Egalitarianism is important in the sense that all the true equality people can be accorded. Justice and equality go hand in hand. A person cannot claim of being an egalitarian if he only takes into consideration his own society. Thus, it can be said that every form of egalitarianism is inclusive, as it is based on the theory of universal human commonality. Origin of egalitarian society. Egalitarianism, from French égal, meaning equal, or equalitarianism, is a school of thought that prioritizes equality for all people. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, egalitarian doctrines maintain that all humans are equal in fundamental worth or social status. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, the term has two distinct definitions in modern English, either as a political doctrine that all people should be treated as equals and have the same political, economic, social, and civil rights, or as a social philosophy advocating the removal of economic inequalities among people. Economic egalitarianism, or the decentralization of power. Some sources define egalitarianism as a point of view that equality reflects the natural state of humanity. Karl Marx used egalitarianism as the starting point in the creation of his Marxist philosophy, and John Locke considered egalitarianism when he proposed that individuals had natural rights. Economic future in egalitarian society. Pastoralism refers to owning domesticated animals for reduction, transportation, or slaughter, as well as successfully stealing horses and maintaining a herd of livestock. Generosity refers to displaying kindness through throwing feasts, giving gifts, self-search, depreciation, distributing resources or property among the group, and providing voluntary assistance in economic activities. Technology refers to demonstrating a proficiency in specialized manufacturing of tools or functional products such as arrows, crafted tools, canoes, etc., as well as displaying superior mechanical skills. Hunting refers to demonstrated competence in hunting by reliably providing protein from wild game for distribution. Exchange refers to maintaining exchange relationships with kin, friends, or allies. Formal gift giving between families during visits and maintaining debts stored through private loans and success in trading. Wealth refers to culturally specific luxury goods such as rare or liquidable assets through travel or trade. Owning a high-quality dwelling, owning symbolically or economically valued items, or slave ownership. Horticulture refers to success in growing food, producing surpluses of staple crops consistently, yielding good harvests. Proficiency in gathering wild plant foods, skill in tree felling, and maintaining productivity in cultivation. Economic egalitarianism, which argues that all should have access to wealth, is the basis for both Marxism and socialism. Legal egalitarianism says that everyone must follow the same laws, with no special legal protections for one over another. Political future in egalitarian society. Geographic knowledge refers to knowing the homeland while being able to protect or identify resources. Traveling to foreign land, pioneer new territory, processing knowledge of the outside world, traveling in nature's life-threatening conditions successfully, the ability to influence outsider for group interest, and maintaining or establishing intergroup political relations. Kinship marriage refers to maintaining kin alliances, the ability to influence and organize distant kin, supporting extended kin in a single household marriage for kin alliance, maintaining marriages in the interests of kin group, having many wives or dependents and marriage exchanged. Oratory skills refers to being able to organize a large group of individuals under a common goal, ability to clearly and eloquently communicate to a crowd. Dispute settlement refers to the ability to resolve conflicts, including miming and comedy to display sentient, meditating, fair discourse between individual or having demonstrated successful in a group or out-group resolutions. Warfare refers to being a natural leader in battle, displaying courage on the battlefield, having successfully killed enemies, demonstrating a willingness to go to war and returning alive. Egalitarianism is a trend of thought in political philosophy. An egalitarian favors equality of some sort. People should get the same, or be treated the same, or be treated as equals in some respect. Ritual feature of egalitarian society. Augury refers to being able to predict events or catastrophes, the ability to interpret dreams, and the foreseeing the future and foreseeing success. Shamanism prefers to successfully healing diseased individuals, possessions of supernatural spirits, applications of medicinal plants or magical surgical techniques, the use and application of magic for healing purposes, or a manipulation of spirit world. Ceremony refers to displaying ritual leadership or experience, completion of initiating ceremonies associated with puberty of age set requirements, completion of cultural ceremonies related to the situations or needs, memberships in elite or secret societies, or the ability to transfer ritual or ceremonial knowledge. Egalitarian societies are non-stratified social systems that lack hereditary statuses with ascribed coercive power. In egalitarian societies, leadership is achieved and dependent upon personal qualities and individual behavior. Shamanism is a religious practice that involves a practitioner who is believed to interact with the spirit world through altered states of consciousness, such as trance. The goal of this is usually to direct the spirits or spiritual energy into the physical world for healing or another purpose. Personality feature of egalitarian society. Self-control refers to maintaining reservation and control through tense situation, not displacing anger, taking a peaceful approach to many situations, and active avoiding conflict. Aggressiveness refers to the ability to express opinion, ideas vehemently when necessary, being able to express discontent without reservation, being forceful in aggressiveness with others, and gaining respect through aggressiveness displayed. Intelligence to being quick-witted and able to make a good decision on the spot, being knowledgeable in a variety of subjects, and displaying contextual knowledge or educational knowledge. Self-control, an aspect of inhibitory control, is the ability to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behavior in the face of temptations and impulses. As an executive function, Self-control is a cognitive process that is necessary for regulating one's behavior in order to achieve specific goals. Assertiveness and autonomy are highly valued as personal qualities and equivalent for males and females. However, aggression is condemned and violence is rare. In modern democratic societies, the term egalitarian is often used to refer intelligent beings inhabiting regions of outer space beyond Earth. Modern egalitarianism theory. Modern egalitarianism is a theory that rejects the classic definition of egalitarianism as a possible achievement economically, politically, and socially. Modern egalitarianism theory, or new egalitarianism, outlines that if everyone had the same opportunity cost, then there would be no comparative advances and no one would gain from trading with each other. In essence, the immense gains people receive from trading with each other rise because they are unequal in characteristics and talents. These differences may be innate or developed so that people can gain from trading with each other. Egalitarianism is a philosophical perspective that emphasizes equality and equal treatment across gender, religion, economic status, and political beliefs. That's for today, and hope you've learned from it, and thanks for watching!